Okay, good morning everyone. Okay, I see we've got everyone in here. Okay, good morning everyone, and welcome to our How Not to Drive Your Business to Zero, but actually set yourself up to thrive in the aftermath webinar series, where we have been interviewing experts in their field. Today, our host Daniel Watson, Director at Vertec IT Services, will be interviewing Alex Smith, CEO at BrittendenSmith. Once again, before I hand over, just a few important notes. A recorded version of this webinar will be available on our social pages. Should you have any questions, please post them in the chat and we'll go through them at the end. And you can also have a look on our registration page for upcoming interviews. And that's it from me. So to you, Daniel.
Great stuff. Thank you, Bianca. Hello, Alex. Lovely to see you again.
Good morning, Daniel, and good morning, everybody. It's great to be supporting you and your client base and those who are interested in this topic.
Great stuff. So just to do the whole full disclosure thing, Alex is a great mate. We were both Sea Scout leaders at Greenhithe Tauhinu Sea Scouts for years and years, and we've had lots of adventures together, and he's one of the best blokes I've ever met. So, but aside from that, besides the skills on the water, which are many and varied, Alex, your main gig is consulting with corporates and government departments and their executive teams and that. Could you tell us a little bit more about what you do there?
Yes, thanks, Daniel. So I'm not in Auckland anymore. I'm based down in the Marlborough Sounds in Blenheim, closer to my wife's family. We've got roots down here. And I really appreciate that you care about me despite the fact that I'm a POM. So I feel very accepted, and that was from the word go. You were very accepting. My work, so I've had a varied background, but for the last 20 or so years, I've been self-employed running a practice in leadership development. At the moment, the orientation of that is to a large extent in the public sector. Probably about 65–70% of my work is in government agencies, and the rest of that work is in sort of primary production, so the Fonterras of this world, and some manufacturing, steel and tube, things like that. So quite large organizations have tended to be my background, but I'm an owner manager of a business, and I coach quite a few smaller businesses also. My interest is how the leaders show up as the best version of themselves so they create great things. Sometimes we choose, particularly when we are owner managers, we choose our path because we love the technical side of our work, and it never occurred to us that we had also to grow a set of skills which is around the people. And right. So that tension is a really big one. I suspect it's being tested to the limit right now during COVID level 3 and 4.
Yes, I mean, I think another way of describing that is people have been promoted to their level of incompetence. Saw that a lot in the army, didn't we? So now my leading question for most people on the series has been, what's the biggest mistake a business leader could make or has probably already made right now with respect to dealing with the whole COVID-19, working remotely, what have you, from your perspective?
Dan, is that your question to me?
It is to you, yes.
Okay, so I think there's variations on this theme. There are, I think, some big traps that leaders can have already fallen into, and if they haven't already, they may well at some point. And if I describe them, I suspect some of the folk on the call are going to say, "Oh my God, yeah." And these traps that I'm about to describe are incredibly human. They're pretty predictable, but once we're aware of them, there are some ways to get out of them. I think the biggest trap is the sense of sucking up responsibility. So when we are leaders, quite often we get to a mode of working that hasn't occurred to us, it's just happened, we don't choose it, where we have taken on responsibility for everything. So when things need doing, when there are problems to fix, we suck up all of those to ourselves and away from others. And the risks of that are that we get burdened, and when we're burdened, we get less than effective in our leadership. And that will impact our energy, our motivation, our patience, and our mood, and all that kind of stuff.
How would that normally show up?
Yeah. And then, but it also has an effect if we're sucking up stuff towards ourselves. What you're actually doing is disempowering the effectiveness of your organization, because you're not allowing others to step up and to grow and take responsibility and share responsibility. So we weaken our whole enterprise. So my first thought would be beware of sucking up too much, and ask yourselves the questions, who should I be involving in this? Even if it feels hard and difficult and I don't have the answers, involve others. When we're leaders, we tend to delegate things we have answers to. We know how to do it. Actually, the things we need to involve others in more than any other time are the things we're stuck on, that we can't make progress on ourselves, involve other brains, other thinking. That's really great leadership, but it doesn't occur to us to do that very often, because it's a vulnerable thing to do, to say, hey, I don't know, I'm stuck, help me.
Yeah.
So that would be the first one, around sucking up, but there's plenty more in that list. Do you want to hear a few more?
Go on if you've got more to give us.
So beware of sucking up. The second one would be the disconnection that we as leaders often can fall into between us and them at the front line of our organizations. And the bigger the enterprise, the more risk of disconnection, I think. By this I mean that over time we can get less well connected with the reality of what it's like for our frontline people. And of course, in this remote dispersed way of working, where we're not necessarily physically seeing our frontline, we may have even more disconnection with the reality of what they're coping with. But the significance of this disconnect, and it's not a choice, it just happens, is that we assume we know what it's like for them, and that can be wrong. And also we forget that our frontline colleagues probably know best how to get the work delivered to our customers and what's really going on for customers. And if we ignore that reality, we're missing a massive source of creation, innovation, ideas, support, engagement, motivation. All those opportunities diminish if the disconnection between us and them occurs. So the question would be asking ourselves, crikey, how disconnected have I become?
Right. It's kind of like asking a prime minister how much the loaf of bread is. Now,
yeah, absolutely.
On your first point there, where if you're a business leader, business owner, you do have additional staff that work underneath you that are in your kind of maybe a first tier of management within the organization. How does it show up to the people below you if you're essentially overburdening yourself? What does it look like from their perspective?
You can't get their attention, so you're unavailable for anything other than pre-programmed meetings. So when you need that advice and wisdom or sounding board from the boss, they don't seem to be able to stop long enough to give you that attention. You might see mood changes. You might see folk changing their habits around being in the office longer than they probably have been. They may not be looking after themselves as well. You'll see lots of signs like that. But for me as a middle manager, it's usually people are not giving me access.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And which shuts out the communication, which will definitely deepen any disconnect that the top end leadership has from where things are actually going. Okay. So if you're a leader who you're spotting yourself in this position, I'm just trying to think, how does one recognize it in yourself such that you can take action? Or if you're in that position yourself, you're looking at your leader going, hey, mate, this is starting to go off the rails. How can you approach that kind of thing? I'm just thinking it can't necessarily be all that easy to figure this out yourself, or to poke it up the chain.
Yeah, those are great questions. I mean, they're quite vicious cycles, actually. So the first part of that was, how do I notice it in myself if I'm a leader who is sucking up too much? Well, the first might be just to notice how frustrated you might be. Because usually it goes hand in hand with leaders feeling they're not being well supported by their teams, perversely. And that you know, gosh, I'm doing it all, you guys aren't stepping up, and you're just not supportive as I need you to be. If we can listen to ourselves, then we'll get some clues about, you know, what's the repeating message inside. But sadly, if we're not listening to ourselves as leaders, so that's, if you like, flagging a good leadership practice, which is, do you make time for us, to yourself, to stop and make sense of what's going on? Some kind of reflective practice during the week. Once or twice is enough around how am I, what am I noticing, am I on top of stuff, kind of thing. If we're not used to doing that as leaders, then we're not creating the possibility of catching ourselves as we slip into unhelpful cycles. But if we haven't got practices like that, then we're dependent on other people giving us the signs, and that's even harder because it's not that easy to confront a boss or challenge a boss, or, you know, shine a mirror, put a mirror up to them to say, are you okay? This isn't working for us right now. You know, it's not as effective as it could be. That takes courage, and often bosses in this state that you find them may not appreciate that challenge, but nonetheless, it's a good service we offer to our bosses if we've got the courage to say, are you okay? What can I do to support? You appear to be busier than ever, burdened more than ever. Have you considered that we can support? That is a great thing that you can offer. You may get a good hearing, you may not, but it's worth having a go.
Right, and that self-reflection time, what do you recommend for people to do to make that work? Because I can't imagine it's just a case of saying, well, I'll do some self-reflection.
It's not natural for many of us, particularly those that set up owner-managed businesses. We get on and do, you know, we're busy as, and the thought of being asked to sit quietly for a while with our own thoughts, it's quite alien to many of us. But it's a good practice to have. It goes in line with, you know, other practices that nurture ourselves, like exercise and diet and health and well-being, all that stuff. So however people choose to do it, because I've got, you know, leaders I work with who do it on a treadmill during their exercise, or when they're out for walking the dog in the morning. It doesn't have to be a sedentary thing, but just choose to stop your thinking for a few minutes and ask yourself 2 or 3 standing questions, which is, how am I doing, how do I want to be? And you just might get some insights into what's going on.
Yeah.
It can take as little as 2 minutes, 30 seconds, but it's worth checking in with oneself like that. On the other end, I've got folk who, you know, like me, who actually have a journal with them nearly all the time, and just have an open page and scribble thoughts as they come to me. And then once or twice a week, I'll slow down and make sense of all those thoughts. But it's just that reflective cycle in whatever way you choose to make it work for you. Just a couple of minutes a week can make a difference to getting yourself out of a pit or out of a downward trajectory.
Okay, just to shift topics a bit. All right, so we're, you know, a month into this lockdown type situation. We're starting to come out of it. What could people do, business leaders, do at this point to maximize their ramp up for the recovery? You know, try and grab that silver lining.
I think there are a number of things here, and I'm hoping it's on the minds of business leaders all over, right, big and small. From a people perspective and a leadership perspective, the question I've been more focused on the last fortnight than ever is, how will we know what choices we need to make to be the best version of us post-COVID? So how do we know what we're learning from this experience, rather than leave it to chance? So there's some intentionality around, let us right now start capturing the stories, the data, the evidence of what's working and that we appreciate, that we may not have done before. Let's start gathering all that data now. So be data gatherers of the learning, and do that individually, do that collectively with your teams, so that you haven't lost awareness of the wonderful things that have happened during this challenging time, and therefore the new possibilities that come from choice afterwards. So that would be one thing, would be, as leaders, let's make a conscious choice to gather the learning from this experience. That means conversations with our teams, conversations with colleagues, customers, or whatever. I think the other thing is, it almost links to one of the pitfalls that might have happened during leadership, which is, you know, I used that word disconnection earlier. But one of the first things that gets disconnected when we're leaders is not actually our vertical relationships, but it's actually relationship with our peer groups, other business leaders or other team leaders in our organization, because we focus on the bit of the action that we're responsible for, and that gets all our attention. So I would also be encouraging leaders to look laterally around, who have I not been speaking to recently because of stuff that actually I could really value their opinion, their insight, their challenge to me. And that's the value that peers give us, by the way, at an individual level. But also the insights we get from those peer relationships, both inside an organization and outside, around the broader perspective of what's going on in the marketplace, what's going on in other parts of the organization, so that we can be as best informed as leaders as possible as we move out of COVID. So thinking about, gosh, who are the peer groups in my network that I may not have invested as much in the last couple of weeks for understandable reasons? How do I reconnect and start those conversations?
Yeah, I think you're right in that. What everybody's experienced right now in the globe is a massive experiment. And it's been, if you think of it like that, everybody's been forced into this great homeworking experiment. And for some people, it's not been a problem at all. It's actually, they've probably found out that there's some things about it that they really, really like, and that they're not going to want to let go of, right? And potentially, there's going to be some things that they found out that they don't want to do anymore, you know, or so taking time to debrief yourselves would be an essential activity, I think, for any business.
Yeah, and as I hear you re-emphasize that, it triggers two things. First is, don't be in a hurry to land on whatever the post-lockdown state is. I mean, I hear most people say that they hope it won't be exactly the same as before, and that probably is my personal opinion too, but it might need to be for some people. But don't rush to have it all fixed and sorted. So I would, in the spirit of experimentation that Daniel's describing, you know, how long can you keep that curiosity and experimental mindset open and try small steps? We have a language of safe to fail kind of thing. So, you know, can we keep our curiosity and open-mindedness for as long as possible, rather than feel like we've got to have all the answers to how we're going to look in June or July or whatever it is, right? I think I would be encouraging leaders to not rush to having it as nailed down as that. Be fluid with it, be curious for as long as you can. And the second bit was who you involve in creating that vision and the form that goes around the future look. In fact, I named it right up front, didn't I? The disconnect with the frontline staff. You know, make sure you're involving the very people who have experienced the front line, because they will have insight and knowledge that's invaluable, and we ignore that at our peril, I think.
Yeah, and there's been there'll be some barriers removed, I guess, and you know, like for some business owners, the idea of having staff working from home has been abhorrent because they felt that they could only ever get best productivity. Have you I don't know if it's in your wheelhouse, but I mean, have you seen any stats or figures about that talks about home worker productivity?
There's a very big study. There aren't many that I'm aware of. A very big study done a few years back now with a Chinese travel agency, and they did a massive experiment. In fact, I can't get the name of it, but I've got to make sure I share it with you folk if you're interested. But it totally shattered our preconceptions of home working being less productive. So this organization, 30,000 people, did actually send half, as a structured intentional experiment, sent half of their workers home for 6 months or so. And they noticed that productivity went up about 15% in that time. Then they, at the end of that, they said, okay, well, we've seen that it can increase productivity, but what we've also heard is not all of you enjoyed it. So it wasn't everybody's choice. So then they said, right, we will allow whoever wants to work from home to work from home. And those who like the structure or whatever it is about working in a more office environment, they can go back to that. And again, I mean, it was a mixed up again, but about 45% of the organisation chose to work from home, and productivity went up 21%. So,
all right.
That's the only thorough study I know. If you Google it, you probably get Harvard Business Review study into remote working, and you'll probably find it. I forget for a minute what the organisation is called. It'll come back to me. But closer to home, in the last month, I've got plenty of awesome stories that hopefully will find its way into some kind of leadership book at some point. In the client bases I'm working with, of unexpected productivity gains, things being possible that weren't possible before, mostly around collaborative possibilities. So organizations who'd never really worked well with one another before and were quite territorial, suddenly being absolutely open to trying stuff together in service of a higher purpose, which was serving the nation, right, and getting stuff done on behalf of us and keeping us safe. And the surprising unlocking of innovation and potential and goodwill and whatever. That, you know, plenty of stories around that. You know, GP's practice who had to find a way of delivering services in lockdown. I happened to be coaching one of the senior GPs in the practice. Gobsmacked at how much work they got done when they did telephone triage. Customers who wanted an appointment had to speak to the GP first, and they got through more customers in a day than they'd ever got through in the traditional face-to-face ways of working. I mean, they had to work out how to charge these people and those who they wouldn't charge because they didn't need anything. But it triggered a whole new possibility. And I'm really hoping that you know, your colleagues and customers and friends on this call probably got plenty of their own stories of a similar thing. Now, that doesn't mean that it's all been good. I've got groups where there are teams within teams who have been highly productive and teams within teams that have been less productive. So it's not all a positive story. So we've got to be discerning around, so what do we hold on to? What made it work? But this lovely reality that the parameters were changed and imposed on us and we had to respond. It may be after COVID, we remember that as leaders, we actually have control of the parameters of a lot of our business. We don't have to accept them. So what do we assume is non-touchable, and actually question that and say, hey, could I not do that? What if I tweak this bit? What about the rules or the cultures that we've inherited and set up that worked for us when we were a two-man band in a garage in Greenhithe, and we're now a 20-person business? Maybe we got to rethink how we run this business, and what could we let go of that have been non-negotiable rules? So as leaders, I think we have the power to notice and change the constraints of our business that may unlock energy, innovation, creativity, loads of stuff. And we just forget that we got that. We just think that's just how it's got to be. I've rambled for a bit now. I'll shut up.
Oh, that's all good. I am aware that you do have another engagement later on, so we probably need to bring it to a close.
I'm not in a hurry. I've got plenty of time. Yeah.
Okay, good stuff. If there's any questions that are amongst the audience there that they would like to ask, please paste that into the chat window, and we'll take that. Have you had any? I'm just thinking about within your organisations that you're looking out for right now. You're coaching within. Have there some that have they've weathered it better than others because of any particular advantages that they've had, or have most people kind of been starting from zero in this one?
Oh, no, it's quite different. And you know, I've got to acknowledge that I've been really privileged during this time to have clients who on the whole have either been essential workers or they're government workers. So the immediate pressures economically have not shown up yet. I know they're going to at some point. You know, there's going to be a cost there. But so they weren't necessarily dealing with those very important human survival realities of, am I going to have a job, and can I pay my bill and my mortgage and feed the family, right? So for the most part, my clients have not fallen into that category, and therefore, so far I haven't. Thank goodness. But there are differences. So things that have made a difference are clarity of purpose. So if the teams that have lost motivation, lost energy, lost focus, been less productive, have suffered from unclear expectations of what to do now. So one of our roles as leaders is always, with whatever state of the economy or business, is always to be giving clear meaning and expectation to people.
Right.
And when we have those as employees, we can contribute our best. So that hasn't gone away, and leaders who have struggled with that, their teams have been affected because they're not clear, what am I meant to be doing today?
Okay, so here's a question from Bianca in the chat session. Any tips on how to handle non-performing employees, I assume, working from home?
Okay. This will have to be quite generic because it's not case specific, but I mean, as a general rule, leading people in these conditions, we would tend to be more empathetic than, or encourage more empathy than normal. So this might therefore be a call to us as leaders to be asking ourselves first of all, which is there any scope for me to be more allowing and less demanding about, or requiring about the standards, about whatever it is, quality or productivity or volume. First ask ourselves that, because the conditions that we're asking people to work in are not ideal, unless they are normally set up to be home-based workers, in which case they've probably got everything right. But now, even then, they've got the distractions of schooling, kids. So first we have to ask the question, which is, even though I might be frustrated, can I put up and allow this for the time being because there is some understandable context? However, we've also got to ask ourselves, what are my expectations, and are my people meeting those? And there will be some non-negotiables: quality, attitude, behavior, whatever. And when we have to confront those, then as leaders, we got to firstly ask ourselves, how do I create the right environment to have that conversation? Safe, calm, full of data, not emotion, evidence-based. How do I do that so that it works for both me and the other person? It's about their dignity and my respect for them as well as my own. So that's probably a little harder in this virtual way, and also if we choose to have those hard conversations, I think virtually it's harder because we've got less clues from this two-dimensional thing. So I think it's got to be much more succinct. It's got to be more to the point, and anybody who's got that kind of challenge right now, who wants any support on how do I structure that difficult conversation, then offline, I've got loads of resources to share easily on that. But I think it's around asking ourselves the questions: do I really have to tackle this now, or can I be more allowing? 2, if I'm going to tackle it now, what state am I in? And am I calm and lucid and objective? Have I got the facts and the data? 3, what state are the others going to be in when I speak to them? Can I create a safe, human way to do that?
Oh, very good, very good. I think you've pretty much worked into the other question that's come through, which is how do you manage your staff if you yourself are uncertain? How do you lead calmly and collectively under these circumstances?
Gosh, that's a really lovely question. I mean, my answer to it probably reflects my style of leadership as well. I would always be encouraging leaders to be more open around their own uncertainty themselves. So rather than being strong all the time and thinking, I have to have answers, that's my identity as a leader, now might be the time to actually bring some more humanity in and say, look, I don't have all the answers. It's just the way it is. I wish I did. These are the things I haven't got answers to. but this is what I do know, that we can get through this. So there's a reassuring sense that together we're going to crack this. And if you see at a meta level, that's where the leadership that our government has shown has been very powerful, actually, which is we haven't got it all sorted, we will have it sorted. I've no doubt we can get through this together, kind of thing. But that requires a vulnerability to be shown by leaders, and that's what I would say we need to lean into. Be clear what you do know and be clear what you don't know. And that's all you can do, really.
Very good.
Whether that answers specifically the question.
Yeah, yeah. Are you familiar with the comic strip called Dilbert?
Oh, yeah, I don't follow it particularly, but you know, it's been around pretty much all my lifetime, so
that's all right. I've always enjoyed that. It's just you can play with the alter ego of the pointy head boss, you know, or the evil HR person. But yeah. I guess it's not appropriate to do that with your employees. But it's nice to fantasize.
What else are we hearing questions-wise from participants?
Oh no, that's all we have at the moment. We have got to 11:30. I don't have any other questions for you at the moment, but how from your own perspective, how have you found working remotely? Has it actually impacted you and your practice at all, or?
Yeah, I mean, at one level, not a huge difference because I'm based at home. I mean, when I'm earning money, before lockdown, mostly I wasn't earning money when I was out and about meeting businesses and clients in their spaces. So the shift for me has been to rapidly increase traffic in virtual ways, you know, doing business virtually. I've had to let go of some ways of doing business because doing large team and group interventions isn't possible. So
group interventions? Hang on, what's that? Group interventions?
Large organizational meetings, that kind of thing. Just working with large groups, right?
Yeah, but you use the word intervention, and that's a fairly intentional word. What does an intervention show up in your world?
That's a great. I shouldn't have used it. I should have needed to catch me. That's jargon from my technical space, right? As you know, it's just around as human beings. If we meddle in somebody else's business, we're going to make an impact whether we like it or not. As soon as I have a conversation with an organization, or I run a meeting, or I facilitate something, that's an intervention. Systemically, some force from outside has shown up, and I'm going to lead it for good or bad in a different state. So that's why we call it an intervention. Is
that because somebody from higher up has actually gone, oh, hang on, this division over here is something's going all cack-eyed, and they're not. Yeah. We've tried to sort it out ourselves. Let's get in a third party to come in and go.
That's often how it goes. But my response is, well, I'm not going to sort out the team that you think is cack-eyed. I'm going to sort you out. So because you as leaders have created this. So what's your part in it? So it always comes back to leaders first. And how do I help them sort out their own shit rather than sort their shit out for them?
Tell you what, that sounds very similar to what my wife does with in her child psychology
yes,
practice.
She's trained in the same way.
Yeah, parents come along and say, "Fix my kid," and then she turns around and goes, "Okay, let's have a look at the environment then, shall we?"
But you're asking me what's different for me. I've really enjoyed what's different for me is I've had to learn quickly how to run webinars and things, and how to run group work on Zoom and that kind of. And I really enjoyed that, and how to do that in a spirit of humble learning as opposed to expert, because I'm not the expert in it.
Yeah.
And I've really appreciated the leveling that this experience has given us, which is actually we've all been navigating this space that's quite relatively unfamiliar, and we've helped each other learn as we go. So
very good.
Really enjoyed that.
Awesome. Okay, so let's wrap it up here. Alex, if somebody's been watching this, listening to this, either today or sometime later, and goes, you know what, I've got some problems. I want to have a chit chat with that fella because I think he might be able to help me. How would he be able to, or she, be able to get hold of you? Two ways.
Alex Smith on LinkedIn, but also just send me a message on a phone, 021 997 564.
Very good. All right. So Bianca, would you like to reappear and tell us what is our next session and when it is, please?
Okay, we have VJ next on the 6th of May at 3 o'clock. So take note, not our usual 11 o'clock, but at 3 o'clock.
Right, and VJ is a professional entrepreneurial operating systems coach. And we're going through a process with him, and it's very, very interesting. It's a whole different way of looking at how you run a business and manage it. So, and it's very successful. Anyway, so thank you very much for everybody for coming along today. Thank you, Alex. It's been fantastic seeing you again. I'm hoping to get down and do some sailing with you at some point when the world has turned a few more degrees. All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. Get out there and smash it. Cheers.